Hello, my friends, and welcome to the June 10th program. I've got a great news update for you in a moment, and I'm very excited that joining me today is journalist, lawyer, columnist, author Jill Filipovic, one of the brightest, best, and most respected commentators, columnists, journalists out there. Very excited to have Jill back on the show. She has covered human rights and women's health issues, pretty much everything from dozens of countries, and she is awesome. And I had an awesome conversation with her, and I learned a lot, and she's super smart, and I think you're going to love it. That conversation begins at 26 minutes into today's show. But I hope you had a good weekend. I had a weird one. Found myself in the emergency room on Friday night with severe abdominal stomach pains. Thank you to a longtime listener, Will Judy, who is going to join me on the show this week. He's a real smart guy, an ER doctor himself. We were talking at the Hangout, which was awesome on Thursday night. Will was telling us some crazy ER stories, so I texted him. He said, yeah, you should probably get to the ER. Thank you to my bestest bestie, Ken Zatz. Dr. Zatz accompanied me to the ER. Ava came over first and checked me out and made fun of me, and she was awesome. And then Dr. Zatz brought me, and I was in tremendous pain in the old tum-tum for some reason, and then it just went away after about an hour in the ER before I even saw a doctor. Got up, walked out, because I didn't want to have to pay for even more health care than I was already getting. It looks like I just had some bubbles of trouble, folks. I don't know. I panicked. It was tremendous pain, but thank you to Will Judy. Thank you to Dr. Ken Zatz as well. Dr. Judy, Dr. Zatz. Great to have doctor friends out there who will always tell you, you know what, maybe you should just go to ER or urgent care and what the difference is. Anyway, I'm totally fine. Yesterday, I went for a 5K run. I like to say 5K because it sounds more than 3.2 miles, but it felt great. I feel great, and I'm really excited to kick off the week with you. Don't worry about me. I'm okay. It was a freak accident. I don't know what happened, but I'm good. And I'm very excited to have you here, and I've got a lot to talk with you about. I hope you had a great weekend. I'm going to cover some of the headlines first from the weekend. Then I've got some great sound bites coming for you. And then my conversation with Jill Filipovic, which is so good. I can't do any of it without your paid subscription. I have about 100 more Patreon members than are paying. So maybe your credit card has an issue. Maybe your membership has expired. If you're having any issue with that, please check up on it here in the middle of June. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. If you're not already a subscriber, hope to see you at this week's Hangout, and last week's was great. I will be, from this point on, I figured out the glitch forever and ever, be posting the Hangouts the next day for subscribers to enjoy again, or if you missed it, like a few of you did last week and reached out, I will have that for you. All right, let's get to those headlines right now from the weekend. Let's begin with Friday, when the May job numbers came out, and depending on who you are and how you look at these things in economics, I think they're probably pretty good. They were better than experts expected. Another big month. May added 272,000 jobs. Here's Reuters reporting the U.S. economy created far more jobs than expected in May, and annual wage growth reaccelerated, underscoring the resilience of the labor market and reducing the likelihood of the Federal Reserve will be able to start rate cuts in September. The Labor Department's closely watched employment report on Friday also showed the unemployment rate ticked up 4.0% from 3.9% in April, a symbolic threshold below which the jobless rate had previously held for 27 months. The unexpectedly strong report made plain that while the labor market has softened around the edges in recent months, its still solid performance is set to underpin economic growth and keep the Fed on the sidelines and taking its time in deciding when to begin lowering borrowing costs. There you go from Reuters. And here's the view from Earth 2. The always wrong Fox Business and former Trumpy Larry Kudlow said, "Look under the hood of Biden's May job numbers and you'll see the problem." I don't know what he thinks the problem is. I'm not even going to pay any more attention to it, but I probably should get economist Dean Baker back on the show to check about what he thinks are the underpinnings of the economy right now, because you know what? He's usually been right, whereas Lawrence Kudlow and a whole lot of others have been so wrong, have zero credibility. So I'll think about getting Dean on this week if you'd like. And now let's go to some world news. There was a state dinner thrown for President Biden as he was in France, a France state dinner, that is, by Macron for D-Day over the weekend. You hopefully paid attention to that. I watched a little bit of Band of Brothers over the weekend when I was trying to deal with my tum tum-tum issues. I thought, well, this will distract me. The invasion of D-Day didn't work. Either way, great miniseries. President Biden's in France. They have a state dinner. And then they have the EU elections over the weekend, which in the European Parliament created a lot of tumult for France. And I don't really understand French politics. I'm sure you probably don't either. But on Saturday, rather, as a result of the elections, European elections on Sunday, President Emmanuel Macron, battered by a crushing defeat in those elections, called for a legislative elections beginning on June 30th. He dissolved the lower house of parliament, called for June 30th elections. The decision announced on a television broadcast in the nation, a measure of that tumult created by Mr. Macron's severe defeat in elections to the European Parliament. Projections gave the national rally led by right-wing Marine Le Pen and her wild popular protege Jordan Bardella, apparently, I'm reading from the Washington Post, about 31.5% of the vote. Macron's Renaissance Party, about 15.2%. I'll get a report from a CNN European politics expert in the sound bites coming up. More international news, though. Let's go to the outcome of the elections in India, where Narendra Modi was sworn in as Prime Minister. Highly recommend you watch or listen to John Oliver last week tonight from 2 Sundays ago, his reporting on Indian politics, specifically the autocrat Narendra Modi. Anyway, he's sworn in for a third term over the weekend alongside familiar allies. Analysts there waiting to see if he'll relinquish key ministries to satisfy his coalition partners, whether his power will be curtailed heading into the new term. Again, the Washington Post says days after shock election results forced him to form a coalition government. Narendra Modi signaled an emphasis on continuity as he was sworn in Sunday for a third 5-year term as India's prime minister. And now let's go to the Middle East. Of course, that was the big news over the weekend, where Israeli forces rescued 4 hostages, lost one of their own in the IDF, but Palestinians lost anywhere from 190 to 270 numbers I saw when the IDF launched this rescue mission during the day to get 4 of those hostages returned to Israel, reunited with their families. The mission included a heavy air and ground assault, killed, like I said, scores of Palestinians. Very controversial. Not clear how many civilians or how many were Hamas militants. It's a very messy situation. I'll get some reporting on that as well for you in the sound bites. Let me move on to more headlines, though. In more international news, shelters along the U.S.-Mexico border now a little quieter, according to the New York Times, and their residents a little more anxious in the days after Biden executive order effectively closed the border for most migrants. More reporting from the New York Times about that. You probably heard Justice Clarence Thomas acknowledged in the Supreme Court financial disclosure after another ProPublica investigation forces him to, that a Republican donor paid for 2 luxury trips that he took in 2019. Just more corruption coming from Clarence Thomas camp in history. The Biden administration tightened fuel mileage standards in an effort to boost electric and hybrid vehicles, which are looking more and more affordable, by the way. A New Jersey businessman testified that he gave Senator Bob Menendez's girlfriend a car in exchange for the senator's, quote, power and influence. The prosecution rested its case in Hunter Biden's federal trial for lying in a gun application. His daughter Naomi testified in the defense. Disgraced conspiracy theorist, white supremacist Alex Jones, the InfoWars conspiracy theorist, is seeking to liquidate his assets to pay Sandy Hook families. I think I already mentioned this reporting, but worth mentioning again, whom he owes more than $1.4 billion for lying about the 2012 school shooting. What else? A federal jury in Minneapolis convicted 5 people for embezzling millions from government programs meant to feed children during the pandemic. Stanford University reinstated a standardized test score requirement for undergraduate admissions, which I think is interesting. Several other elite colleges have also restored the practice after abandoning it during the pandemic. I don't like standardized tests. No. They give me a lot of anxiety and diarrhea. Apparently everything does now. And America lost a hero over the weekend. William Anders, who flew on the first manned space mission to orbit the moon and took the famous Earthrise photograph in 1968, died at 90 in a plane crash. He died in a plane crash at the age of 90. His photo became an icon of the environmental movement, which I've been a part of. But terrible news, sad news, but what a great man. I was reading a little bit about him as a result of learning of his death. This week, what's coming up? The U.S. Open golf tournament begins on Thursday. Who cares? The G7 summit begins on Thursday. That matters. Switzerland's hosting a peace summit next Saturday. Ukraine aims to build support for its plan to end Russia's invasion there. We'll hear a lot about that. The Stanley Cup finals have begun. The NBA finals have begun. The French Open is over. And that's it. That's all the news I've got for you in the headlines. Now let's get to some of those sound bites I brought. All right, let's start with CBS News New York that does a pretty good recap. I'm going to give you 3 minutes on what happened in Israel with this rescue mission. I think this is a fairly objective report, detailed, and I wanted to start with it.
Benny Gantz cited frustrations with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, claiming he is mismanaging the war. Gantz's resignation comes after Israel rescued 4 hostages in Gaza, an operation that killed more than 200 Palestinians, according to Hamas. CBS 2's Lisa Rosner joins us now in studio with the very latest. Lisa?
Well, Jessica, for Israel, this was the most successful operation in the 8-month war, but Palestinians say it was a day of horror. That war cabinet member had been planning to step down, but reportedly waited a day to not take away attention from the hostages that were rescued.
Israeli centrist Minister Benny Gantz announced his resignation from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's emergency government Sunday. But the move does not immediately pose a threat to Netanyahu, who still controls a majority coalition in parliament. Gantz said in part Netanyahu was making empty promises and the country needs to take a different direction, as he expects the fighting to continue for years to come. It comes one day after Israel's attack on the Nuseirat refugee camp in broad daylight. An IDF spokesperson says intelligence determined the hostages were being held in 2 apartments about 200 meters away from each other. New footage from the IDF shows the moment hostages Noah Argamani, Almog Mer, Andrei Kozlov, and Shlomi Ziv were rescued. Troops are on the beach escorting hostages as a helicopter flies over. Video of their homecoming to a hospital in Israel shows emotional family members as they reunited for the first time in 245 days.
I'll do whatever it takes to get them all back home. Hamas is committing war crimes every day, including the holding of these hostages.
Hamas says more than 200 Palestinians were killed during the operation. A member of the IDF was also killed during the rescue. This video shows what Nuseirat looks like now. This witness says he doesn't want aid. He wants the war to stop. He says, quote, bombardment and firing were from all directions. I am 32 years old. I have never imagined to live a moment like this, end quote.
We have asked Israel to take steps to be more precise and targeted in its military operations. But there is only one answer to all of this, and it's the answer I keep coming back to, which is a ceasefire and hostage deal that would end the suffering, end the conflict, end the war, and bring all of the hostages home.
He says mediators Egypt and Qatar have not received word from Hamas on a proposed ceasefire deal. It's not clear how these rescue efforts will impact that, but the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken returns to the Middle East next week, hoping to seek a breakthrough. Jessica.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Jessica and Lisa and CBS News. Good reporting. Now let's move on to some of the Sunday shows, starting with, let's go to Fox News Sunday show, where Senator and always awful unsmiling Tom Cotton was the guest, and Fox News anchor Shannon Bream pressed him on the disgraced former President Donald Trump's reported plan for peace, which doesn't exist, in Russia-Ukraine conflict. Listen to this.
So I want to bring this up because there are reports that what President Trump plans to do to end that conflict is to potentially push Ukraine to give up Crimea, parts of Donbass. If that is the plan, do you agree with that strategy? And would that be rewarding Putin in order to wrap this thing up in the way that he intended to start it and take some of that territory? Is that just giving him what he wanted?
Well, Shannon, President Trump and his campaign has said that any reports of plans like that are not authorized and they're not coming from the president himself. Furthermore, President Trump has said that he strongly supports Ukraine's strength and survival. He had a strong relationship when he was in office with President Zelensky. President Trump is the one that provided Ukraine the weapons they needed to fend off this Russian invasion that happened in large part because of Joe Biden's weakness. I don't think President Trump wants to prejudge what the situation will be come January, nor do I, in part because we have no idea how much worse Joe Biden can screw things up. We have to judge the circumstances as they exist next year when he returns to office, and hopefully when we have a Republican majority in Congress as well, to make decisions about what best protects America's interest and the interest of our allies and partners.
Okay, right. Sure thing. Yeah. Zelensky, Trump had a great relationship with Zelensky, who he blackmailed to get dirt on Joe Biden. Come on. All right. Well, Tom Cotton is in the running to be he's been named as a potential vice president for Donald Trump, which would be just fantastic in terms of the evil empire. And speaking of which, the dumbest senator in the U.S. Senate is Tommy Tuberville, and he also made some real stupid comments about Putin and Russia.
He doesn't want Ukraine. He doesn't want Europe. Hell, he's got enough land of his own. He just wants to make sure that he does not have United States weapons in Ukraine pointing at Moscow.
God, that guy's such an idiot, Tommy Tuberville. He got enough land. Okay, well, let's go to Las Vegas, where the disgraced former president held a rally for his deplorable supporters that remain. It was scorching heat, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The Clark County Fire Department said most of the medical calls were related to heat. 6 people were sent to the hospital. 24 others were treated on the site. And a train wreck of a human, Marjorie Taylor Greene, wasn't going to miss her opportunity to address that audience of overwhelmed, heat-exhausted terribles. And here she is, just with more evidence that they worship the man as if he's God, comparing Trump to Jesus in this short clip. I'm sorry, I've got to play it.
The Democrats and the fake news media want to constantly talk about, oh, President Trump is a convicted felon. Well, you want to know something? The man that I worship is also a convicted felon. And he was murdered on a Roman cross.
Yeah, well, if that wasn't enough, a religious leader also opening for Trump said this.
What more can be said than thank God we're here in Sunset Park to worship and bring back the greatest president we've ever known in our generation.
He did say to worship him. Well, here's one of the rally goers who may have decided he didn't want to worship him very much longer.
Sir, let me know, tell our audience what your name is and how are you doing today?
I'm Chris. I'm from the PAA podcast. I'm very, very hot. I was planning on staying out here for 8 hours, and I don't think I'm going to do it. I'm live streaming, but I'm going to go around and say hi to people and then just boogie, I think. It's nasty out here.
Guy's just trying to get content for his podcast. Come on. And then there was this woman who was also talking to some camera. And I don't know, I couldn't quite place who her voice twin was. And then I realized that this is our own Desiree, I think, from the stand-up community.
We're trying to go ahead and make, all the LGBTQ stuff normal. I don't like that. They try to push it into the schools. I really don't like that. And us as parents, we want what's best for our kids, and we know voting for Trump will be a good start.
I don't know what the hell Desiree's doing in Vegas at a Trump rally, but I think you've got some explaining to do, lady. All right, now here is Orange Jesus right now. I'm sorry. I know people get triggered by his voice, but the teleprompter went down, and so he savaged all the working people there that were part of the rally in terms of the PA and tech, etc. This is just classic Donald Trump. He's complaining about the microphone first and the teleprompter, and it's just so cringe and, well, worth listening to, in my opinion.
Tell him to make the microphone louder. It's terrible. Yeah. He just came up. Are the teleprompters not working, sir? Not even a little bit. Great job. And then I don't pay the company that does it, right? And then I end up with a story Trump doesn't pay. I don't pay contractors that do a shitty job. And that's a shitty job. That's a shitty job. You can't read a word. But you know what? It usually ends up that the speech is better. It's crazy. Then they'll say, oh, isn't it terrible? Trump takes advantage of his No, I take great. When I have a good contractor or a subcontractor, nobody gets paid faster. But when I have contractors that do this kind of work, you can have them.
Not even remotely true. I mean, some of the worst headlines in the campaign in 2015 were stories that he didn't pay people who did a great job, of course. Look him up. Oh, and he said this, which should be headlines all over the country.
By the way, isn't that breeze nice? Do you feel the breeze? Because I don't want anybody going on me. We need every voter. I don't care about you. I just want your vote. I don't care. See, now the press will take that and they'll say he said a horrible thing.
Yeah. Oh, he was just joking. He was just joking when he said that. He absolutely cares about those people that were literally dying to hear him speak in that over 100-degree heat. And that is enough from the Trump rally in Vegas yesterday. Let's go to Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States. She was on Jimmy Kimmel Live I think this is on Friday night. Of course, she's a former federal prosecutor. She understands the law, the legal system, and trials very, very well. And she was talking about Trump's trial in New York, which is good. I think it's good that she should be talking about it, should be saying these things publicly.
A jury of 12 people, peers, over the course of 6 weeks, deliberated on the evidence and facts and unanimously determined guilt for 34 felony counts. There was a defense attorney who actively participated in selecting that jury, who actively made decisions about witnesses to call, witnesses to cross-examine, and the jury made their decision. And, I think that the reality is cheaters don't like getting caught. and being held accountable. But, the reality is, let's just fast forward to, again, November. I think the American people want to know that there is a president who believes they are accountable to the people.
All right. Well, I've got more from the vice president. She was also in Maryland on Friday campaigning, and she was at the 10th annual National Gun Violence Awareness Day and marked the occasion by underscoring the need to pass more laws to stop gun violence. The vice president highlighted, here she is.
And today, on Gun Violence Awareness Day, a special thank you to all the organizers, the advocates, the leaders who are here, who have fought forever to keep our communities safe. I believe the right to be safe is a civil right. The people of our country have the right to live, work, worship, and learn without fear of violence, including gun violence. And yet, today in America, 1 in 5 people has a family member that was killed by gun violence. 1 in 5. Today, as Angela mentioned, gun violence is the #1 cause of death of the children of America. Think about that. Not a car accident, not cancer, gun violence. Last year, I convened over 15,000 young leaders on my national college tour. And at the stop, every time, I would ask the students, raise your hand if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade you had to endure an active shooter drill.
All right, a little bit of the vice president's speech in Maryland on Gun Violence Awareness Day, where activists all over the country actually had events. I thought that was really important. And now let's get to that report from the CNN reporters explaining what happened with the French, the European Parliament and French elections. I thought this was a good explanation, so I wanted to share it with you.
This is a big blow to Macron's Renaissance party.
A big blow and a pretty big surprise, I think, to many on his own side and even within France's political press. He didn't have to do this, Frederica, is the truth of it. The far-right's national rally came in at just over 31.5% for the time being. These are projections, not the final tally, but it is considered such a resounding victory that the president has announced his snap election, first round June 30th, second round July 7th. And that could redraw France's parliamentary map. Now, of course, President Macron wasn't giving up that much in this second mandate. He'd only had a relative majority. Still, it is a big gamble and could lead to some pretty big changes here on the political front in France, Frederica.
And it's not just in France. I mean, exit polls have also showed gains for far-right parties in Germany, Austria, and the Netherlands.
That's right. They made some pretty big gains across the board. And this had been widely predicted in the polls. Things like frustration over the economy, inflation, fears in some manufacturing industries and in farming about green regulations. For instance, a lot of resentment to the EU had been driving this vote. And yet the far right did do remarkably well in a number of different countries, and specifically Europe's biggest economies. But it is the centre-right that remains the largest party, it seems, according to these projections in the European Parliament. Still, the centre-right and the far-right will now constitute a very large bloc, and that could also change the hue of Europe. Because there are a number of issues on which they're going to be able to weigh where they simply didn't have the weight in the past. So it is a centre of gravity here in Europe that shifts to the right. But the biggest change of all, really, specifically now that we've had the snap election announced, with a possibility that the far right might win. For now, sources at the Elysée they don't think that's likely, but it is a possibility. And certainly what Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, who led the party into these European elections, are hoping for, Frederica.
All right. Well, there you go. Scary stuff, what's happening in Europe and around the world. Obviously, we'll continue to pay attention to it, analyze it, and do everything we can to prevent and resist it here at home and everywhere else. And now, finally, because of that seriousness, let's get to some jokes. Here is Seth Meyers, NBC on Friday.
But my favorite example of MAGA weirdos claiming the guilty verdict would just make Trump stronger came from Fox host Jesse Waters, who chose a very bizarre analogy.
Democrats think locking up Trump locks up America first, but it doesn't. Makes it stronger. Do you ever see the prison bodies on inmates?
What an interesting question that I hope you've never asked within 500 feet of a school. Fredo, no, I have. Have you? In what circumstance did you see the prison bodies on inmates? It's not great when your pro-Trump talking points sound like the 5th most popular search on Pornhub. Also, there's no way in hell Trump would ever get swole. First of all, he's a 77-year-old man who would be starting from less than scratch. The only workout he's ever done is when he lifts those 2 invisible dumbbells. That's what it looks like when you do jumping jacks with 0-inch vertical. And also, prison's not like Ozempic. It's not a prescription you take that gets you in shape. You still have to do the exercise.
All right, there you go. Seth Meyers on Friday night, and definitely watch Last Week Tonight, which I warmed up the audience for on Saturday. This guy never stops working. No, come on. I'm good. And now it's time to get to my interview with Jill Filipovic. And if you appreciate the work I'm putting into the show each and every weekday and more, then sign up for a paid subscription. If you haven't already, patreon.com/Pete Dominic. All right, Jill is one of my favorites. She's super smart. You should subscribe to her Substack, jill.substack.com. She's written several books as well, including most recently, Okay Boomer, Let's Talk, How My Generation Got Left Behind, and The H-Spot, The Feminist Pursuit of Happiness. She is on Twitter and Instagram at Jill Filipovic. I highly recommend you subscribe to her work, if even just for her This Week in Women contribution that goes up at her Substack, I think every Friday. Anyway, great stuff. We talked about some of her recent writing and what the hell is happening in the world, and I'm very excited to share it with you right now. Let's do it with Jill Filipovic. There she is. Jill, thank you so much for joining me in a different time zone on a Friday. Really appreciate your time. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
You've been publishing really important work on a regular basis over at your Substack. I want to get into all of it, but in case people aren't subscribers, how would you describe the work that you're doing and have been doing at jill.substack.com?
I would say it's a pretty broad coverage space, a lot of stuff on gender, women's rights, but also foreign affairs and general American law and politics.
We met at a table, I think, the first time maybe on MSNBC talking about a potpourri of things. I remember thinking, why am I here next to you? But, and then at one point talking over you and then being like, I should just leave. But you do such a great job of talking about all of it. Let me just go back, and I thought of you right after I watched that football player. I guess he's a football player. He's a kicker. Is he really a football player? And his speech, everybody knows about it. You wrote about it. Harrison Butker's misogynist speech is a symptom, not the disease. Were you, first of all, surprised that a man or anyone would come out and make a speech like that, even at a Christian conservative college like that, at this point in time?
No, I mean, I was insulted, right? I thought it was pretty egregious. And I thought that the backlash against it was very justified. But I wasn't particularly surprised. I mean, I think especially at this particular cultural moment where we are seeing this rise on the right of, I think, a pretty intensive form of gender traditionalism and a real backlash to feminist successes.
That's a pattern in America and other places, right? Like the backlash to feminist successes is not new. It's not surprising. Fair?
Yeah. I mean, Susan Faludi wrote a whole book on this. And if folks who are watching or listening haven't read it, you should pick it up. And one of the things that she points to is, it tends to be both a political backlash, but also a social and cultural backlash, right? So as we see women make significant progress, often the reaction to that is then an entrenchment of traditional gender roles, kind of cultural forces that really emphasize the value of women being at home or the dangers of women being in the workforce, coupled with political movements on the right, mostly on the right, although not entirely, sadly, that are trying to kind of entrench those gender norms into law, or at least create laws and policies that incentivize different behaviors between men and women.
And to make that speech at a school where there are women who are graduating ostensibly, I'm guessing even at a conservative Christian college, to pursue careers. But then somebody told me, well, not necessarily. They just go to college for the experience. They're not really, a lot of those women are really have ambition to be homemakers. I don't know what their ambitions are. I'm assuming that because they're getting an education, they want to go into the workforce somehow. But what do you make of that audience and how those women didn't necessarily get up and walk out?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the story that got missed is the fact that the messages that Harrison Butker was sending in that speech are messages that women at conservative colleges, and in the U.S. that mostly means Christian colleges, are hearing all the time, right? Even as they're being educated. And this is not universally true. It's not true of every professor, or every class, or every Christian school, of course. But it is true of a lot of the kind of very right-wing ones. And I think the reality is that a lot of the women who graduate from those schools or go to those schools will see in those 4 years a bit of a transition. I mean, many are probably coming from more conservative families. And I think there are some women, I mean, perhaps even many women who go to schools like that, for whom those 4 years are a pretty significant evolution. And it turns out maybe they like independence. Maybe they like learning. Maybe they like feeling, rewarded for the effort that they put in. And they do see a path for themselves in the paid workforce. I mean, the truth is most American women, whatever their religious backgrounds, work for pay at some point in their lives, right? So I do think most women, even graduating from conservative Christian schools, are going to go and get jobs. That may shift if they get married, if they have children. For many women, it's kind of an in and out of the workforce flow with family, especially for more conservative ones. But the idea that, all of these women are just going to graduate college with MRS degrees, I think is just almost surely not the case. And even if they do hold themselves some traditional views on gender or some conservative political views, I would guess that the reality of their lives are a lot more complicated than those views would suggest, and certainly than Harrison Butker's speech would give them credit for.
And you featured Jessica Calarco's new book. I interviewed her and had her on the show this week, holding together how women became America's safety net. Even if, in your view, America could or should be the man goes to work, the woman, some traditional gender norm stuff. Or even if you were like me and just wish that you could have a partnership where only one person had to work full time. But as Jessica documents so well in her book, and you featured it in your Substack this week, there's no safety net. So even if, and as you said, even if you wanted to have a quote traditional, you can't in America. Anything you want to add to that or say about just her work? And you've been talking about this obviously for a long time. Even if you wanted that, how are you supposed to do that and live and have any kind of decent lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, the math on that doesn't work for most people. I also think the reality of it doesn't work for a lot of people, right? I think there was a reason why the second wave feminist movement was very much responsive to a culture that expected one partner to stay home and one partner to work, at least among kind of like middle class white families. I think Jessica's book is amazing, and she makes so many incredible points about how women kind of are, women absolutely are the country's safety net. And I think one thing that, she captures this in the book, but I'm not sure we totally still appreciate it, is the fact that a lot of women and men, especially in kind of more liberal places, women and men, let's say, who are graduating from institutions of higher education. And there was a pretty famous study of this out of, I believe, Harvard Business School. So very high achieving group of people. When you ask them kind of early on, setting out into their careers and their romantic lives, what do you want your work-life balance to look like? And many of them, men and women alike, say, I want egalitarianism. I want a fair distribution of at-home and out-of-home labor. But where there is a bit of a difference is when you then ask, well, what if that's impossible? Right? Then what do you expect?
Right.
And what the women say is, well, I still expect that we will basically, both partners will work super hard to make sure that that's as fair as it can be. And what the men say is like, well, I'll work and my wife will stay home. So sort of like as soon as you hit this wall, as soon as things get a little bit difficult, you see, highly ambitious, hardworking women say, I'll do the work of powering through. And you see equally ambitious, hardworking men say, well, I just expect then that my wife will take care more of the family stuff. And I think how that manifests, and excuse the ambulance going by in the background, I think often how that manifests is that even though both partners are working, right, and both partners are breadwinners and working for pay, men then expect that because they are serving in that kind of working for pay breadwinner role, that the women, their wives, assuming these are heterosexual pairings, will take care more of that of the family side of things.
Right.
And that's how it plays out, right? And then without any external institution, without childcare, without paid parental leave, without these kind of structures around us that can help families, it is women who wind up doing all of that. Not all of that stuff, but most of that stuff.
Right. Very well said. I was so happy to see you featuring her work. It's such a good book, and she's just a really great communicator, as are you. Here, let's talk about the state of reproductive rights. You're covering this day to day. It would seem there are changes in states across the country. It's hard to keep up with. Last week, but you do a great job helping us. Last week in Congress, Democrats, I think in the Senate in the Senate, obviously, they put up for a vote protecting contraception, ostensibly just to get Republicans on the record, because we keep warning about what's next, and we hear conservatives and folks on the right saying we're not going to go that far. I mean, Harrison Butker did. He went after IVF and surrogates, which I think a lot of conservative people are maybe even shocked by. Like, hey, wait a second, we use that. What do you think about the strategy of putting Republicans on the record? What do you think about the attack on contraception? Is it realistic? Should we be concerned about that being next?
Yeah, I think it is a good idea for Democrats to put Republicans on the record. I actually wrote a piece for Time magazine maybe 2 weeks ago about the coming war on contraception. I absolutely do not think that feminists are being Chicken Littles here when we say like contraception is on the chopping block. I think what that does not mean is that the right is going to bring us a Supreme Court case in the foreseeable future. I do not see this Supreme Court anytime soon overturning the right to contraception wholesale. But what I do see in the meantime that's already happening is a concerted effort on the right to limit access to contraception and to undermine confidence in contraception. there's a couple examples of how they're doing it, and it really does kind of follow the abortion playbook. So there was just a case in Texas about parental consent for contraception, where a father who was religious basically sued, saying he should have the right to kind of yay or nay if his daughters want to access birth control pills or any other form of contraception until they're 18. And because of kind of a peculiarity in Texas law, he won that case in the Fifth Circuit. It's a little more nuanced than that, but suffice it to say, in Texas, it is now the case that girls under 18 may have to get parental consent for contraception. And, parental consent was a huge wedge issue on abortion as well. So I think we can probably expect to see some parental consent laws being proposed in conservative states for contraception, not for abortion, which is definitely bad news for things like teen pregnancy rates. So we see them going in there. One of the most, I think, visible and effective and scary strategies that we've been seeing for the last decade or two has been an effort to redefine contraception as abortion. So we already have laws, right, restricting abortion in more than a dozen U.S. states. We're banning abortion in more than a dozen U.S. states, restricting it in more than that. And what we've seen from anti-abortion groups is saying, look, we're not against contraception, but what we are against are abortifacients. And what they define as abortion are things like the IUD, for some birth control pills, for many emergency contraception. And these are all drugs that do not cause abortion, cannot cause abortion, do not end established pregnancies. They prevent pregnancies. But the anti-abortion movement argues that they cause abortions. I think one thing that's particularly scary is that they do have a Supreme Court case on their side. So they have the Hobby Lobby decision, which was a challenge to the contraception mandate of the Affordable Care Act. And in that case, the Supreme Court basically said, even if you're a private company, not a religious group, you can still, based on the religious beliefs of the owners, refuse to provide contraception to your employees. And it doesn't really matter if those religious beliefs are scientifically accurate or not.
Refuse specifically in that case, I believe, to cover it as their insurance policy. You can have all this health care, but we're not going to pay for the cheap things that would save everybody money if they could prevent you from having a pregnancy, right?
Right, exactly. So in that case, the owner of Hobby Lobby, the sort of family that owned it, objected to IUDs and to emergency contraception. And they specifically did not want an insurance policy which would allow, the cashier at the Hobby Lobby store 10 states over to be able to go to her doctor and have her IUD or her emergency contraception covered as Obamacare required. And there's a lot that was bad about that case. But one of the things that was particularly bad is that the Supreme Court basically said, it doesn't matter if contraception causes abortion or not. What matters is that you have a sincerely held belief that it does, and that that's religiously wrong. And so that really does kick open a pretty big door to redefine contraception as abortion, including contraceptives that, these do not actually cause abortions. These are not abortion pills. And in those cases, you don't necessarily have to rewrite the laws at all, right? If you've already banned abortion, you can kind of smuggle contraception in there. And then the third pathway, which you may have heard about, is efforts to revive the Comstock laws, which are, these Victorian era anti-censorship laws passed by the most priggish, prudish American in history. And contraception has actually kind of been pulled out of those laws in the modern era. But I'm not sure that there is actually anything totally barring conservatives from being able to fold it back in. So those are kind of the three big pathways. There are others. But if you think they're not coming for contraception, you're either in denial or you're not paying attention.
Yeah. I'll link to that Time magazine piece that Jill mentioned and wrote. Also this week, this didn't get as much coverage because of the Senate vote, but House Republicans passed new abortion restrictions in the Veterans Affairs bill. So this obviously affects women who are veterans. And this provision in the spending bill prohibits the VA from offering abortion counseling, in some cases abortion procedures, to veterans and their beneficiaries. It overturns the Biden administration rule that allows the VA to provide abortion care when the life or health of the mother isn't in danger or in case of rape or incest. This is the VA now. They're doing whatever they can to make it harder, including for veterans.
And for active service members. I mean, that wasn't like, I don't know that was on the on the list this week. But Republicans have also gone after abortion care for active military service members.
Right.
So women who are serving and defending our country, and Republicans are trying to give them fewer rights than, I would have as a resident of New York State.
Let's talk a little bit about, it's Pride Month. You write a lot about LGBTQIA, everything. We just lost in my town, the Board of Education, 3 seats to 3 right-wing extremists right here in Rockland County, just north of New York City, over a lie they were telling about the trans access to bathroom. It's been horrific. You've seen this play out across the country. I covered these issues for 10 years at SiriusXM. Don't Ask, Don't Tell, marriage equality, the Supreme Court. So many rights were gained by LGBT folks in just the last decade or so. And we are seeing the backlash to that as well. You're obviously covering it, talking about it all the time. Where do you think we're at here in June? Pride Month, 2024. I think it takes us back to the Supreme Court and obviously the kind of MAGA movement as well. Yeah?
Yeah, I think we're in real dark times when it comes to LGBTQ rights. I think it's very hard to separate, I would argue impossible, to kind of separate out women's rights and feminism from LGBTQ rights, right? I think both of these things are fundamentally about expectations around gender. And yeah, the same way we're seeing a huge backlash to women's rights and to feminist progress, I think we're seeing a really huge backlash to LGBT rights. And progress in that arena. And I think you're right to bring up schools because, the kind of moral panic, right, around trans kids using whatever bathrooms they want to use and, teachers, whatever, indoctrinating students with books about gay penguins, or whatever it is we're scared of.
One of the other issues is protecting them from the rare case that their parent is crazy and would hurt them or harm them or minimize them if they came out as gay or trans. That was like a protection that we also had to deal with. That wasn't a lie. We did protect those kids by giving them a certain, giving the teacher the ability to not necessarily tell your dad if your dad's going to throw a fucking rock at you when he finds out. And that's not a decision only left up to the teacher. But that was another huge hang up, and it affects almost nobody. And if you don't know that your kid is confused about their gender orientation or their sexuality, then you're not a very good parent.
And I think it also, a lot of kids, childhood and especially kind of adolescence is this phase where kids are trying on different identities and they're experimenting and they're asking these questions. I mean, I think all of us, maybe not all of us, but I think most of us, if you remember back to middle school, like the most intense question was like, who am I? And you would try on like different outfits. I am the dungeon
master of Dungeons and Dragons. That's who I am for about a month. And I was like, oh, I don't like to play that anymore.
Yep. And, obviously sexuality and sexual orientation and sexual identity are much kind of deeper than that. But, especially during puberty, these are moments where kids are exploring these questions. And, I do think even very good parents may not totally know where their kids are landing. And to me, the mark of a good parent is giving your kid the time and space to figure out who they are and decide for themselves when they come to you, right? And opening that space up. And I think, this effort to not give kids other trusted adults to go to talk to, the idea that that's somehow undermining a parent's right instead of expanding a child's universe, I find to be incredibly dark and authoritarian and scary, and I think does say something about the parenting skills of the people who want to, mandate that their child talk to no one but them.
That is so well said, Jill. So well said. Let me ask you finally about your most recent piece at your Substack, because this all kind of comes back to boys and men. You're talking about this. A lot of people are talking about this issue. A lot has been being published, a lot of new interesting research. Your piece is a better story for boys. American boys are suffering. Can we help them? Talk to me about their suffering first.
Yeah, so that piece was kind of pegged to a series of other pieces I read, hinging on this new book by Ruth Whitman, WHIP, W-H-I-P-P, called Boy Mom, which is like a term that I deeply hate.
Like Boy Mom. Boy Mom, reimagining boyhood in the age of impossible masculinity.
Reimagining boyhood in the age of impossible masculinity, I think is the full title, which I like better. But she's looking at similar questions to what Richard Reeves has looked at in his book of Boys and Men, and a few other folks that are not like right-wing conservatives, but are worried about the state of boys and of men. And what I was trying to get to in the piece was getting away from the zero-sum game of like, okay, well, if boys are doing bad, it means girls are doing good. Right. And so then we should take something away from girls in order to make the boys feel better. Or if men are doing poorly and they're not getting married and they feel isolated, then like that's a problem that women need to fix. Right. Like settling for men that have all kinds of problems and are going to make their lives worse in order to like raise those folks. None of which I think is very helpful. But, I do think that there are distinct and serious issues that boys and especially, adolescent and teenage boys are facing that then do kind of, throughout the natural evolution of aging, turn them into men who also are really, really struggling. And I think there are particular issues that girls are facing, right? Like you look at the rates of depression and anxiety around girls and, they're going through the roof. When you look at rates of things like loneliness and time spent behind a screen and isolation and substance abuse and suicide among boys and then, into adult manhood. There's some really, really striking numbers. And I think that it's sounding a real alarm. And I don't think the answer of just like men and boys have privilege compared to women and girls. And so they need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get their stuff together is really that helpful. Like that message has not helped. There is something particularly going on there. And I think that we do have a collective social obligation to identify it, to try to figure out what's causing it, and then to try to solve it. And, one thing that I say at the end of the piece is like, I don't really know what's on that to-do list. I wish I could have ended that piece and been like, do X, Y, and Z, and then like boys and men will be fine. And I don't think anyone totally has their head wrapped around what is going to work in order to, let boys and men have an identity as boys and men, right? That doesn't hinge on these kind of very old gendered ways of doing that, of dominance, of provision, of, being worthy only because of what you can bring to a family, whether that's physical strength or kind of financial providing, or simply of like that kind of competitiveness and like being number one and dominating those around you. One thing that I really struggled with in that piece is figuring out, well, what is the positive script? Who's the man that we look to and we say, I want my son to be like that. Right.
Well, there's so many ways to take that. And there's 100 answers, cultural policy, role modeling answers. I think the answer obviously is me, because I'm so physically strong and wealthy that I should be the role model to take this on and demonstrate. Well, you've all 5'7" of me.
You and Donald Trump, just the ideal American men.
Right. His kind of strength. It's interesting who they hold up as role models. Sometimes you think, really, how that person is the opposite of strong to me. That person can't even lift a bottle of water or whatever, but then strong, quote, masculine men will look up to certain, it's always interesting to see how that happens. I could talk more obviously about this issue. I'm thinking about it so much right now. I'm really happy that you wrote that piece, and I wasn't familiar with Ruth's work. I'll definitely try to get Ruth Whitman on the show and interview her about her book. Jill, You continue to do excellent work. You're so great at writing. You're so great at explaining your writing and all of it. And I will continue to look to you and subscribe to you and support your work. It's vital. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
Well, there you go. Jill Filipovic, jill.substack.com. What did you think? Did you learn anything? I learn a lot every time I read, talk to her, and it's always a pleasure. Go tell her that you heard her here, because she's not always the easiest guest to book. I want her to want to come talk to us, and I would love it if you go tweet her or go on Instagram or go subscribe to her Substack, most importantly, jill.substack.com. So worth it. All right, that's all I've got for you today. I will be back here tomorrow. You bumblebees at the end are the MVPs. I love you very much. Thank you so much for your support, for your friendship, for your company, for your humanity, for your everything, for your presence, for your life. I love you. John Carroll, 2-time Emmy Award winner, takes us in, takes us out. JohnCarroll.org right now.
Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. We got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.